Here we are for our panel discussion on tomorrow, demain. We have three great panelists tonight. There was supposed to be a fourth one, Senator Robert Jackson, but he had a scheduling issue, so he couldn't make it unfortunately tonight. But we're very happy to have Dorothée Pierrat, who's a French citizen but living in Holland for a few years now, and she's you do zero waste. You're engaged in zero waste efforts.
Yes.
And so you'll be speaking to us about that. Right next to you, Adam Sobel, who's a professor of applied physics and applied mathematics, and professor of environmental sciences at Columbia University. Also the director. You have a long title. You do so many things. You're also the director of Columbia's initiative on extreme weather and climate, and you're also the author of a book on Hurricane Sandy, storm surge. I said hurricane, and people say superstorm. It's a hurricane. Okay, perfect. And Stephen Roundtree, who is environmental policy and advocacy coordinator at We Act for Environmental Justice. It's an environmental justice organization based here in northern Manhattan. Before we speak of the movie itself, I was wondering if maybe you could tell us briefly what brought you to, fight against climate change and your various activities. What started your engagements?
So yes, I would say that just moving to New York City and going to New York City supermarkets and realizing how much waste and trash was around all the neighborhoods, and especially in low-income neighborhoods where I was working. That's how I started to think about trash. I realized that my trash has an impact on other people's lives, and I started the zero waste lifestyle.
Adam, you want to?
Yeah, I'm a scientist. I study weather and climate, so the global climate problem is very much in my consciousness all the time, and I wouldn't have described myself as primarily fighting or being an activist for most of my time. I think like many of us, or at least some of us who work in this field, we are becoming more politicized as time goes on. Because there used to be this idea that we just tell the world what is happening and the right things will be done, and then we've learned that that's not the case. I think that's been hard for many of us, but we're coming around to it. So anyway, that's, I think, I'm here.
You mentioned that your wife was environmentalist, and she
was and is the one who gave me the idea to be in this field in the first place. Yes, many years ago. But still, my impulse was mainly to study the science, and the idea that it would somehow be relevant to human society was a kind of distant concern, but it's become a bigger one as time has gone.
There are two mics. I'll use mine. Maybe not, because it's not turning on. Oh, here it is. All right. Is this one on?
No. Maybe use it.
There's a green light. It's on.
Yeah, all right. All right. It's saying it's on. I'll speak up.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, for me, growing up in a rural area in Massachusetts, I was really interested in the natural world, environmentalism. But as a person of color, I realized, as I was growing up, I came to realize I was one of the only people who looked like me in that setting, and wanted to know why, and wanted to know why access to nature and access to a clean environment was something that was not for everyone, and it led me to understand, what some of the key issues with environmental justice were, and to pursue a career in the field. And obviously, as it relates to climate, it's really a key component of that as well. So.
And we'll be speaking of that aspect, obviously, that's very important. So coming back to the documentary now, what are your main takeaways? When you look at some of the solutions that were put forward in the film, are there any things that you think could apply here to New York City or to this neighborhood? Dorothée, you want to start?
Yes. So to my point of view, what I loved about the movie is when they're talking about reducing, reusing, and repair. And at the end of the movie, we have this school from Finland saying that the kids are learning how to do things by themselves, sewing, knitting, and the woodwork. And it reminded me at the beginning of the movie when the lady growing veggies was saying that she feels like she's getting power by growing her own food. So doing this thing by yourself, being able to fix your clothes, to do these kind of things, is one way to reduce your trash, but also to get something really empowering and really bringing choice, I would say. Joy.
Yeah, I think my other two colleagues up here are best positioned to sort of speak from the point of view of people engaging directly in local action. For me, that's purely a personal thing. I mean, I support my local farmers market. I try to participate in local everything as much as possible within the confines of a life where it's not sort of a full-time occupation. But so for me, this film was, this might be an unpopular opinion. For me, I had mixed feelings about it because on the one hand, everything in there is wonderful and beautiful, and it all looks great, and to the extent that we could have those things where I live, I would support them. At the same time, the movie starts talking about climate change and biodiversity loss, which are really serious global problems. I think that the biggest solution, those problems are not going to be solved only through uncoordinated local action. It really is going to take national and global action. And right now in the United States, I mean, maybe it's already a very different time and place from where this film was made, but in this moment in the United States, it really feels to me that the crisis we have is first and foremost one of the national political system. And so that's kind of addressed here a little bit, but I think that challenge is much different and not going to be so easily solved by just local actions. I don't know how to solve it, but it seems to me a different beast. And while everything in this film is beautiful, I wouldn't want, I think at the national political level, we need to engage, if we're going to get, things are going to get any better, we're going to have to engage people who are either unwilling or unable to participate directly in things like we see on the screen. So I wouldn't want the film to give people the impression that by pursuing local things, they don't have to think about the national political problem. And so that's the source of my mixed feelings about it. But that's not to critique anything in the movie, but just to think about how it plays here and now. Those are the complications I have.
So that would mean getting involved in elections, basically, voting. Basically, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying that yes, I guess that's what I'm saying. Yes, vote, not just voting, but being more engaged in the national political debate, as toxic as it feels now, and as distant from the concerns here. But I mean, watching this film, we have, the country is basically run now by a faction that is more or less opposed to everything you see on the screen. So to just say, well, we're just going to keep in our own town and do it, feels to me like hiding from what the big scary problem is a little bit.
Yeah, so I sort of had a similar impression. I think there were aspects of the film that I think were incredibly nourishing, just to see how folks were really stepping into the power that they had at the local level and making change, and seeing that those solutions are real and are possible at the local level. But I think, yeah, I was sort of struck by the absence of the call for holistic solutions or larger scale solutions. With that said, though, there are a lot of exciting things happening as well now. I don't know if people are aware of this, but New York State is really on the verge of passing one of the most, I'll say the most progressive climate justice and racial justice laws in the country. It's called the Climate and Communities Protection Act. It's something that we actually been working on along with 150 other groups across the state. But I think like at the we've seen the catastrophic dereliction of that duty to protect the planet by the federal government, but I think state governments and local governments in particular have in some part stepped into that void, and I think that's a really exciting thing, but I think it definitely was something in the film where I was like, all right, didn't quite see that come there.
The film came out before Donald Trump, so
Right.
so probably need to do another movie. Yeah, I mean, kind of to your point, Adam. How do we get people to care about this issue? It seems like there's so much information about climate change. At the same time, people have a lot of things on their mind. They we see the devastating effects of climate change every day, but at the same time, it seems that there needs to be more. So you study extreme weather. Is that not enough to put people in motion? And if not, that's not enough. What will it take?
Right. So the attribution of extreme weather events to climate change is a topic I'm very much engaged in, and I could talk about the science of it for a long time, and I would love to. But I think maybe it's not the. I mean, what I want to answer is the first part of your question, which is how to get people more concerned. If you had asked me a year ago, about this, I think I would have said. Well, it's not a matter of getting people concerned about climate. The old idea that the scientists would just educate people and that would make the difference, I think we've learned that that's wrong. And instead what we have climate has become a marker of ideological affiliation. In other words, in the United States context, if you vote Democratic, you tend to think climate is a serious problem. If you vote Republican, you tend not to. There's many exceptions, but those are. And so the important thing is not climate itself, because who sees it one way is the same as who sees a lot of other issues, the same, in a way, and they'll go together, and it's the struggle between those two, as opposed to getting people who already believe it more motivated. That's what I would have said a year ago. What has changed my view on this is these kids' movements, which I find just astonishing. And what's astonished me even more than the fact that they're happening is how astonished I am by them, because in a sense, this is what scientists and many others who are in favor of action on climate have been saying for a long time, is we should take this problem much more seriously, we should be doing something about it. And now these kids are actually doing that, right? They're really taking it very seriously in a way that no one has before, I don't think. I don't think there's been a movement like this on climate that's this. And so we've sort of been saying this, and then all of a sudden somebody takes it seriously and does it, and we're like, whoa, what happened there? So and I don't know yet what the outcome is going to be, but it feels different than it felt before that. And so I don't know. I'm not answering the question of how to get people motivated, but I think it's possible, and maybe that more attention to the issue from the people who already sort of believed it but didn't place it high on their list. Maybe that matters a lot, and maybe more than I, my cynical self of not long ago, would have thought.
Stephen, and specifically, you work obviously with low-income communities. So how do you get folks in those communities involved in this fight? And maybe you could tell us a bit why they're more affected than communities that are more affluent.
Sure. Yeah. So to your second question there first, I think like everything we saw in the film, all the impacts of climate change, the potential, deleterious effects, like they affect everyone, but they don't affect everyone equally. So right. So if you live in northern Manhattan, sorry guys, if you, I'm sorry, yeah, but they can't even be downstairs.
Yeah, we need the mic for people downstairs.
So maybe I'll just put it here, and then maybe this will sound okay. Okay. So. Anyway, so if you live uptown, you're more likely to live in older, less weatherproof housing than somewhere downtown or elsewhere in the city where people who make more money live in. So as a result, when the climate becomes more unstable, we're going to have more heat, more extreme weather. Those homes are going to be more susceptible to people getting sick from heat stroke. have to pay higher bills because they're less weatherized, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's just like one tiny example of how climate impacts people differently. But I think like people know this. I mean, people that we work with, that we survey, that we like have, we meet with and work on policy together and talk to. They understand this, and they understand how inequality works in the city. And I think for us at WeAct, it's about building civic muscle, using the term building civic muscle, right? Which is like building people's ability to participate in the institutions that sort of make decisions. And how do you build muscle? Well, you build a gym. And that's what WeAct is in our community. That's what we try and strive to be, is somewhere where folks who are professionals and who are sort of engaged in the issues that mean things to us in sort of the professional sense, meet people who have lives and do their work every day, but are concerned with this stuff. So that's sort of how we interact, making sure that people understand how the systems of government work and how they really work, not just like the bills sitting on Capitol Hill, but like who do you actually have to agitate against, like who's the actual decision maker in certain things, and sort of working that way with the folks that we have with us in Northern Manhattan to help influence decisions.
But how do you do that when you have to work 3 jobs, or when you're literally thinking of how you're going to make ends meet, right? So how do you get those folks involved in this fight?
Yeah, I mean that's part of the problem, right? The economic system that we have is sort of like, it's demanding more people's time, and it's telling us that it's okay to have to work 3 jobs, and that the solution is to work harder and work more jobs, right? So yeah, it definitely reduces people's ability to be someplace where they get to exert themselves. That's not related to making money. It's definitely a challenge. I think what people keep coming back to, people are interested in, is like actually getting results, and actually having the campaigns mean something, and actually having a voice heard. I think also is really important. Just actually saying, we are in a setting with a decision maker, and now you know that I know that you know that my electric bill is too high because your programs stink and they don't work, and I'm spending money on these programs and I'm not getting anything back out. And being able to have that feedback loop and that actual interaction and confrontation means a lot to people, when oftentimes they're just told, hey, sit back, you don't have to worry about this, but it's going to be a challenge, and that you're not going to be able to overcome it. So I think that's part of it. But yeah, I mean, this is the system we live in, where folks of low income, who are primarily people of color in Northern Manhattan, just don't have the same access to governance as other folks.
You changed your life when you arrived in New York and you decided to commit to zero waste. Tell us, how difficult was it in this city to do this, and how do you achieve it?
I would say that it's a process. I didn't change my life overnight. It was day by day and week by week, month by month. You start going to the farmer's market. And going to the farmer's market, you just have to take your reusable bag instead of getting the plastic bags. Reusable bags for your veggies instead of the plastic bags. Getting your eggs in carton and giving back the egg carton. That way you don't have this packaging. Getting your cheese in a reusable plate at the farmer's market. They're really happy about that. So all these tiny things, I would say going to the farmer's market was a real big thing. Because you can also bring your compost over there. Right now you do have a program in New York City. 3.5 million New Yorkers get curbside compost, but otherwise you do have many programs around the city to bring your compost, and this reduced to 20% the amount of waste you have at home. Then it would be again thinking step by step. What about in the bathroom? What about in the kitchen, obviously? What about the cleaning products? And you have one thing And that would be the thing of the week to change. And you just check. You have so many blogs, so many people talking about that. Zero waste home, trash is for tossers, family zero déchet, plastic-free life. So it's so easy just to Google it. How do I do that on Google? And then you get your response. Using soap just instead of body wash. Bar shampoo instead of shampoo in a bottle. So those are the tiny things that takes time to change, but again, you just don't get overwhelmed. And then you realize that you're saving money. Because you don't buy over and over all the napkins and the paper towels and things like that. You're saving time because you don't go over and over to the supermarket to get those things. And you just change things that was hard at the beginning, just become second nature. Like my toothbrush is a bamboo brush. I just don't have to think now, where do I change that? So when people say it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, I would say I save money and I save time now that it's done. Yes.
So, and you think that anybody can embrace that style of life? Because it seems like you had the infrastructure, you had the information, you had the time to look for that information. What do you say to maybe people, cynics who would say, it's not possible when you don't have all of that?
So I would say that we live in a family of two with the cat. I don't have any kids, and I know that it's a big issue. But in the audience, I have my family, a family of 4, and they do the process themselves. And again, it's just one ID per week, and then it doesn't seem to be too much. And kids are on board with that. I get my niece, I get my nephew, and they start thinking about plastic bag waste. They start to bring themselves their straw, like the stainless steel straws. So when you get kids on board, when you show them that it's fun, actually they will get you ideas.
Demain was, tomorrow was well known in France for, its very hopeful tone about climate change. What is the best way for you, in your experience, to speak about climate change? Do we have to frighten people at this point, or is it better to be hopeful? Dorothée, you want to start? Or, yeah.
I would say that I would second what my friends here said about having mixed feelings about a movie like that, because you don't want to say, hey, everything is great, everything is going to be perfect soon. But we've seen that it's not working because, as Cyril Dion said at the beginning, people during their day and in their Facebook feed see all these horrible things all the time, and then we just want to shut up everything because it's too much for us. So I like to think about climate change in a hopeful way, thinking about what we can do locally by changing things in your lifestyle, the way you consume, the way you buy things, the way you reuse things, and also the way you manage to be on board in community boards, in voting, calling your senator to support some campaigns. I would tell the people that it is a social issue, but it is also a social solution. Getting on this zero waste and climate change fight got me to meet incredible people, got me to get so many connections in New York City, and so many friends. So that's what I like, and that's what makes me keeping doing it in the long run.
Yeah, I don't really have a position on whether hope or fear is better. I mean, people who know me well would not. I'm usually not called an optimistic person. Maybe you can tell. But I mean, but I think, you know, we are all communicating. There's no one, you know, voice. I think it takes many different ways of communicating about it, as many as there are people. So there are happy films and there are scary ones. I'm not convinced that it's obvious one is better. I mean, I think fear is actually a pretty powerful motivator for many people, and you know, the statistics. I don't know a lot about political polling, but what I've read in the newspaper is that the polls now are showing greater concern about climate than they had in years previous among both you know, people of all political spectrum. I mean, compared to how they were before. I mean, one side still cares more than the other one, but they're all becoming more concerned. And I don't know why that is, but I think part of it is due to news that is scary. I mean, that the media is covering it more when there's a hurricane or a drought or a flood or whatever. There's more stories in the newspaper now connecting it to climate change. Some of those stories are good and based on the science. Some of them are not as good, but either way, they're not hopeful stories. They're frightening stories. But I think that has some effect. At the same time, you know, it's true that people can be paralyzed by fear and depression if everything is negative. I don't really know. You know, as scientists, we are trained to not think that we're about either hope or fear, but we're just about the facts. The truth is, we're human beings, and we're, you know, influenced by those things like everybody else. But so I don't know. I think we have to have, you know, I think at this time when the level of concern used to be very little and now it's becoming more, I think the attitude towards how to tell the story should be sort of let 1,000 flowers bloom, and whoever's good at telling the story will be more effective than others. I don't know if that's answering the question. It's maybe a cop-out, but.
Yeah, so it's a tough one. I mean, I think for me, the best way to characterize it is like, it's like the biggest tragedy that I think we've ever experienced. It's like the loss of our natural heritage, and that's like something that should keep everyone up at night. And it's scary to think of our world that we know sort of being really changed in ways we can't predict. But I think it's also like a chance to, as the film was really showing, it's a chance to right the ship. It's like an opportunity that we can't not address. So we have a real opportunity to address it in a way that's curative rather than just doubling down on what started the problem. And so that's sort of, that's the hope I derive from it, for sure.
Perfect.
One last question before we open up to the room. What is, according to you, the most pressing issue that you would want folks in this room to get involved in? Dorothy, you want to start, or you want a little more time to think about it?
No, I'm
Overconsumption.
okay.
We just consume too much, and all the issues are gathering to that. The energy to produce one thing, the transportation to bring into your home, and then the trash you're going to create with it. So to me, it's just thinking refuse, reuse, repair, and some say what, compost, but think about what you need. And to me, going to zero waste, we started reducing what we had at home, thinking about what we need, and that allows us to have a smaller apartment, so to be in a neighborhood we love, spending less money on rent. I can afford to work less, so to have some activities and community activities. So yes, starting with overconsumption, rethinking the way we consume things, everything.
Yeah, I would suggest that if people are, all the local things are wonderful. I wouldn't want to ask anyone not to do them. We do some in my home. We're not zero waste, but we're lower than we could be. We compost and we do all those things. Not all those things, some of those things. But I would urge people to be engaged in the political process. I think there's a lot of energy around these issues that there hasn't been in a long time, and I think it would be great to see that sustain and grow. And I say this as someone who has not been as active as I wish I had in the past, but is trying to be more so. I think there are some aspects of these problems that can only be solved that way, and so that's what I would suggest.
So I have like a really great American football analogy to this one, and I was like really excited to use it, really excited. Right, yeah, and then I got here and it's great, and I was like, oh my god. However, I'm going to try it anyway, because it might make sense. So basically, in a football game, there's an American football game, there's this event called kickoff. Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
So it's a kickoff. And if you're trying to stop the team that's returning the football to running it in to score a touchdown, the team that's playing defense against the harm of the kickoff return, they're all running to try to get the ball. And the ball carrier can move wherever they want, but the people who are on defense, their job is to run straight up the field in parallel little lanes, so to speak. And I think that's the analogy. Like, if you want to solve the big problems that are really can be anywhere and can be everywhere at once, really, the key is like stay in a lane. If you're doing something like the problem is insurmountable if you feel that you must be tackling all problems at once. So if you're someone who's you live in the Rockaways and they're building a gas pipeline, like get on your horse and get up and figure out how to be a part of that fight. And that's a great way to help. Or if you live in northern Manhattan, you know that there are buildings that are going to be in danger from climate, like plug in there. And I think really throw yourself into it, and then if everyone gathering that consciousness together, then that's how you make change.
Does anybody have any questions or concerns or things they would like to share? Yeah, right here.
Hi. So I'm Paulina. I'm a junior at Fordham right now, and lately I've been thinking about what to do for graduate school, what to do for my career, and kind of where to go. And I'm in business, and that doesn't really inspire me. This does, and it does keep me up at night. And I was just wondering if any of you have any advice for programs to look into, schools, careers, anything like that, just to kind of guide me a little bit. Thanks.
For me? Yeah, I guess I'm technically an educator.
More than us.
Right, but they don't train us to answer this one. I don't have a ready answer. I can tell you how to be a scientist if you want to do that. I'm not sure it's the best way to bring about change in the world necessarily. I think the lane is a good one. You have to have some sense of what you like to do and what you're good at, because otherwise you will be unhappy, and if you're doing it, and if you're unhappy doing it, you'll be unsuccessful, and no matter what your goals are, you never, overcome. That's just old person advice, that I would say to anyone about anything, but I think it's true. So then, within whatever sphere of activity, then there may be ways to steer yourself more in one direction than another. Within science, I could tell you, right? So if you, I think in my field, we're not some sort of hero saving the world, but we're working on a problem that has some relevance. And for me, if I want to go use my training in the service of public goals, there's ways of doing that. They're not always easy to do within the confines of the traditional job that many people have, but there's ways of doing it. But you have to first start from something that you actually are motivated. You have to start with some sphere of activity and deciding as a young person how to do that. There's no guide to that. Well, there's a million books you can buy, actually, a test you can take, but I'm not sure how much, I'm not sure, I can't recommend one. But so there's two processes, sort of finding what direction you want to go and then how to make it relevant to what you think it should be relevant to. And some things are easier than others. Some professions lend themselves more naturally to serving, larger public goods than others, but many have potential.
There's a question in the back.
I would like to second that. Just to really second that, because going to zero waste events and Trash Talk City, for example, you would see a lot of entrepreneurs. So on another field of science, meaning that I've met some people, designers, and they just saw all the fabric getting thrown away. And they started to do a zero waste design and selling zero waste clothes. Zero Waste Daniel is his name. A girl started to gathered the fabric in New York City, designing of fabrics, scraps, and she did the fab scrap store. So you do, and some people are working on compost, but some people also are teachers, teaching education, going to grow New York City, an organization, and I'm sure we act as well, teaching kids about global warming. So you have so many possibilities, like in the film, to work on what you like, and in the long run, what you like will make you where you want to go. That's what.
Yeah, in the back, very back.
I just had a comment I thought maybe on the scale of action and political engagement. I really don't have a problem with people turning their backs to national politics, or I call it the theater of partisan politics, if they focus on local action. Because for me, our political power is in everything we do, every dollar we spend, and that ripple and echoes in a global way. So I like to focus on local actions, international, supranational, those dynamics. Because at the national level, they're forced to move anyways. The corporations are so heavy. So it just, when I heard your first remark, that I thought about that.
Want to respond? That's okay.
I think it's a great remark. I think when you think of Rosa Parks, she's just sat on a bus one day, and obviously there were other movements before, but it started being one drop by drop, and then it brings to a whole thing.
Okay, I will respond. I mean, let's put it this way. Let's just.
Sorry.
Should I?
Yeah,
Okay. Let's just imagine the situation where you have a government in the world that's doing something really terrible. Let's not worry about whether the United States is that place or not, or some other country is that place right now. Just take the hypothetical. Like, you can take the classic examples, Nazi Germany, whatever. Take the worst situations in world history you can imagine where some government has a lot of power and uses it badly, and terrible things happen. I think most of us would feel that if we are there at that time when that's happening, we should respond in some way, that we should engage with that. That just to say, I'm going to be in my own town and not worry about these large patterns, the judgment of history is not favorable to that view. So then the question becomes, okay, are you in that situation or not? When is the national situation so bad that your duty as a human being is to deal with it? And everybody has to answer that for themselves, and we have to all try to read the evidence and decide, at what level our engagement in this political sphere is important. I can't answer it, but I think most of us could agree that there should be some point at which we should engage at that level. And so then, if we agree on that, then we don't have to agree on exactly when it is. We never will, but that's all I want to say about that.
Maybe a question to Stephen, to piggyback kind of what you were saying, is what would be the best level of government to act, basically? Is it the local level, the state level, or the national level? The gentleman over there seems to say that national level, we get it, but
No,
what is your...
What I mean is that they're interwoven, and any action we take at the global scale is global by nature.
Okay,
because
got it.
The world is today. So $1 defense, does it end in petrochemical conglomerates or pharmaceutical industry? Or do you support small farmers who are passionate about being gardeners of the world and making the soil healthier and the water cleaner? For me, that's our political power, and it echoes through the thought. It's not,
They're not mutually exclusive, though, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to choose one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, sure. I'll just respond briefly with just sort of my understanding, and I had the interesting realization that in New York City, the city elections have a much higher participation rate than the state elections. So the folks, the folks who represent Harlem, Northern Manhattan at the state level, who take their issues up to Albany, like you can swing those elections by like 1,000 votes. Most of them, but that's like not that close an election. And so like if you have your eye on what's going on, and you like tell 1,000 people that this person is being a jerk and they're not looking out for your interests, like you can turn that seat over. And you may have noticed, people may be aware that the last election cycle there were a bunch of there was sort of this group of Democrats in the New York State Senate who were working with the Republicans really in order to sort of procure perks for themselves, and it was really leading to a lot of a logjam in the state Senate, and there was 7 of those 9 folks voted out in the last election. And right now in Albany, it's like a new day. It's like all of a sudden just passed like really progressive toxic chemical law that bans toxic chemicals from children's products. Like, just there have been like dozens of laws that have been passed that are really going to benefit residents of the state because people had their eye on state elections. And so that's just like just an example. I mean, you can't pick one level, but I think like just understanding what the dynamics are and what the opportunities are at each level is really important.
One of the things that I've been thinking about lately is, and that this film showed was all these individuals doing things which, to me, kind of self-actualized, what it is that they can bring to the world, and it was very natural and sort of organic, no pun intended. But as a scientist said, to the Fordham student, find what you're good at, do and what you like, and then you can do great things, and things seem to take a natural order. The one thing that I feel is difficult is, especially in the United States, is that sounds wonderful, but then you do have to pay for your, family's health care insurance, and that's such a complex, confusing system. And I can say right now, I'm working 40 hours a week in a corporate job, and I see folks who can't speak up and say, actually, really, is this something that we want to market? But it's because it's paying their paycheck and they're able to pay for their health insurance for their family. So I guess I'd just like to throw into the mix of those side topics. I think getting to a healthcare system that, people can then get jobs, that they can be artists and not starve. They can have a local bartering system because, I'm an amazing craftsman, or I'm great at planting things, or I would love to look after your child if you can do this for me. And I just feel like if there's a way to bring that, spirit, would be helpful. So
it's a whole change of the economic and political system that you're just describing, I guess.
Just that.
Just that. Somebody
would love to say something. Sure. Yeah. First of all, I think I heard 2 different things in that comment. One was about healthcare and making it easier for people to, have fulfilling work, and anyone, certainly I would think that's a wonderful goal. I think the other thing, I just wanted to, I grew up in this, I want to sort of correct a misimpression I might have given it to the Fordham student. I grew up in the 70s United States where we were told, be anything you can be, find your passion, and it's easy to overstate that. I mean, I don't think we can all do what we want to do. We can't all be, rock stars or whatever. We have to live within the system that is what it is. We all have to survive, and I think, so the flip side is you don't want to judge people for not doing something glorious. All I meant was that in response to the question of how can I find a path in my life, whether it be how can I find work or a path through my education that will enable me to make a difference. All I meant to say was you have to start from some internal direction rather than just picking a goal. Well, maybe if you're passionate enough, maybe you can just pick a goal and do whatever it takes to get there, but for most of us, that doesn't work. So that's all I meant. I didn't mean that we can all just decide tomorrow that we're going to be an artist and everything will be fine. We all have to live in the real world. But so
yeah. I'm not sure whether the point is to give you some feedback about the movie. I think you are here for that.
Whatever you. I'm here for many things, but.
I mean, I'm not sure you introduced yourself, so I'm not sure.
I'm a reporter. I'm moderating this panel, but you're welcome to make comments on the movie or ask questions.
I came to see it because I never had a chance to do so, and I just would like to say that I find it extremely Eurocentric or Americano-centric. I'm not sure it would be as much as American or centric if it were made today. Also there is certainly something to learn from other parts of the world. That's one point. The second point is I don't know if I don't look in the right direction, but being a New Yorker for many years, I don't see such an awareness about waste or climate or protecting the environment. If we think of garbage, the garbage system dates back to the past century. I live in a building that has about 140 apartments, and there's no system to trier les déchets, to sort out garbage. So I don't know where you see this awareness in this place. And also I would like to hear more about what you mentioned. You mentioned that there is a climate communities protection act that is going to be enacted, and I would like to know more about that.
Dorothée, you want to react?
I will start
Yeah.
the beginning of the question and let you do the end. So to me, I started the zero waste lifestyle because I didn't see any awareness, because I was shocked. But I think I was living in my own bubble in France, thinking everything was fine, and I discovered it's not so quite neither. But that's why I do it, to search for it, to being part of the growing community. And I do see a difference between now and I would say even 5 years ago. When I started, everyone was thinking that I was crazy. And now I'm here. So it's tiny, but it's coming. And even like, for example, for the plastic pollution, 5 years ago, when I started to talk about it, again, everyone was thinking that I was crazy. Now I can see in the news, it was in really specific news at the beginning. You really had to go to find the information, like on the specific organizations, and a specific French radio for as a French person, France Culture only in a few shows. And then it became mainstream. You have the mainstream media talking about that. Today you had an article in the New York Times. So if I would agree with you, it's not big, but it's growing to me.
Sure. So I want to just briefly say more about the Climate Change Protection Act, but also just invite you to just chat afterwards. So I'm sorry, I'm like being a butcher with this thing. But basically, the CCPA does a couple things. It prescribes a really rapid decarbonization of the entire economy in New York State. That's like transportation, energy generation, and use in buildings. It also creates an interagency advisory board on climate. Basically like requires all sort of state decision making to take into account the effects of climate change and the disparate effects climate change has on different communities. The bill also directs 40% of all energy monies that the state collects from ratepayers, from carbon trading, and from taxes to frontline communities that are going to be disproportionately affected by climate change. And those are sort of the main things it does, but I'll be talk more about it. But it has passed in the Assembly the last 2 sessions, and it's hopefully going to pass both. And the governor has a complicated relationship with it and the people who are the proponents of it. But there's hope that in some shape or form it'll go, and it'll pass. Maybe as a follow-up for folks, we could like send out the bill numbers who can actually get engaged and start, calling the governor's office and making sure that they're engaged with their representatives on this. It's something that's like really huge for the state.
Can I say one thing really briefly about New York City?
And then we'll take the last
I mean,
question.
this is where I think the tension with between the global and local is really complicated. So people often think that, well, if you think of the environmental goals, it's grass and trees. It's New York is this dirty place where we create garbage and we don't take care of it well enough. And that's the way it feels often when you're in the city. But from the point of view of the global environmental problems, living here is one of the best things you can do because we use relatively less resources compared to people in the rest of the country. I mean, of course, compare us to many places in the developing world we use much more resources. But we live close together in small places. We don't drive much. It's public transit. For the at the socioeconomic level that one is, whatever that may be, the city is a less resource-intensive place to live than elsewhere. Except that for some of it, like my carbon footprint is high because I fly too many airplanes. So like that, but that's not the city's fault. That's just me, So I just want to stick up for New York a little bit there. It's in the global scale, it's cleaner than it feels when you're here. You would be using more stuff if you lived in the suburbs somewhere.
We'll take a last question. Yeah, right there.
And then we'll go down to the reception room to carry on the conversation now.
So all of you have so many things that I find very interesting. Living as a New Yorker, I've been here my entire life. So I think the most important thing is that we want to feel empowered, and we see that empowerment, it can only happen in communities, and with change is only going to happen with regulation and law. So I can say when it snows in New York, Fifth Avenue is going to be clean. My neighborhood won't be. And that's just
Yeah, where are you from?
Richmond Hill, New York. So quite out of the city. It's about an hour commute, but I make it because it's my life. And I think about zero waste all the time. Actually, we work for an organization that very much is sustainable, from the way we operate to the fact that we have like bamboo forks in our office. So we're very conscious about that. But in my community, I don't have a farmer's market. The farmer's market that I know of in the city is on 14th Street, which is an hour-and-a-half commute for me. So there's just definite things that I'm conscious of and I want to be a part of, but the infrastructure right now isn't there. And it's not a matter of people not caring, it's do they have access to it? And it's not that, because the money thing, I think it's quite equal in a farmer's market and in a supermarket. I don't find the prices to be quite high. But I think it's just a matter of access. So I think building the infrastructure and having regulation and actual people that rally around it is what we need more of. So I'm hoping that we can get more of that in the next coming years, but hopefully it changes.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying because I'm working a lot in the Bronx, in Queens as well, but in low-income neighborhoods. And when I go lunch, I have the same problem of looking at something, and it happens to many places, not only in New York. I would say that even going to the supermarket, you can still choose things like bringing your own bag, not putting your veggies in reusable. Yes, I have my little. And thinking about what material you can choose from. Just thinking about, would I rather get the vinegar from a plastic bottle or a glass bottle? Would I rather get my pasta in a plastic container or a carton container? And those tiny things are already something. So you need to go.
No, maybe you can show us how you do it. And I'll hold the mic so you have your...
So you asked me, yes, you asked me to bring my trash tonight. So I brought my trash. It's about a month of trash. And we still have a bit of plastic because sometimes the farmers market only sell cheese. Some vendors only had them in plastic. But I really wanted to bring that. That's my kit. And I got this bag from a friend. So
red, white, and blue.
Yes. So it's my kit. That's something I always have in my bag, especially in the Bronx when I'm working. I always have a jar. And tonight I had my wine in this jar. So this jar is good for anything, water, alcohol obviously, but also doggy bag when I go to a restaurant. If I still have food, I don't need a doggy bag in a plastic, I have that. And I have a produce bag, so if I get any banana at a bodega, I will get it in it with reusable napkin and a spork. I don't know if you heard about sporks. So just with only that, yes, and sometimes I have my compost bag, but I know I'm a radical. Because when I get my banana in the box, I like to put the peel in this compost bag to compost it at home. And I love your comments, because it's not always easy, but we can still think about a few things when we're stuck in a situation. You go? Yeah?
Okay, well, we can carry on the conversation downstairs. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And then it's like, I think horses, but so it's like,